Hey, what up guys? So we're here with another Star Wars reaction video. If you're new channel, welcome. This one is called Who Was the Weakest Sith to Ever Attempt to Terrorize the Galaxy? And shout out and credit goes out to Geetsly. I hope I'm saying that correctly, and I've been saying that a lot. And if you guys didn't know, Geetsly's channel has been the source of my the Old Republic Sith history videos and Republic history videos. If you guys haven't seen them already, they're on the channel, so go check them out. But he's been doing an amazing job at that. Now I'm really curious as to this one because Sith are very powerful, like Emperor Palpatine, Darth Maul, Darth Vader. I almost said Darth Sidious, but I was like, then again, that's Palpatine. And like, you know, Count Dooku and Darth Malgus. Dude, Malgus is OP. And Exar Kun, Darth Revan. There's so many, but now I'm curious to see like who is actually the weakest out of them all. And I wonder like what caused them to earn for them to be known as the weakest Sith to ever terrorize the galaxy. So without anything else, let's jump into the video.
Fans of many franchises, Star Wars included, have a tendency to argue about characters' power levels. This is something we personally aren't too interested in, but as it's an inevitability in the fandom, we might as well set the record straight now and again. Usually, power level arguments are about which characters are the strongest, but today, we're going to be considering the alternative. This video is going to be about the weakest Sith Lord in the history of the Star Wars universe, a little known man by the name of Darth Gravid.
Darth Gravid. I think I saw his photo once, but I just don't know who he is.
Sergeant on deck.
After the 7th Battle of Ruusan, Darth Bane founded the Order of the Sith Lords, bringing the Sith back to their roots in an attempt to make them stronger. As part of this new order, Bane decreed that there would only be 2 Sith Lords, a master to embody the power and an apprentice to crave it. This was in stark contrast to earlier Sith orders, which had many Sith Lords
he created the rule of 2.
Many Sith who weren't Lords at all, such as assassins or marauders. But Bane did away with all of that. Rightfully, he thought that it weakened the Sith as a whole. The dark side of the Force, he once wrote, was like venom. The more vessels it is spread among, the weaker it becomes. The Order of the Sith Lords concentrated the venom of the dark side in the smallest possible number of vessels, making each individual Sith Lord as strong as humanly possible. If the dark side was like venom, then Darth Gravid's apprentice must have been extremely potent, because Gravid was anything but. We don't know all that much about him, but what we do know is enough. As Dark Lord of the Sith, he nearly cocked up the whole Sith grand plan, and not by accident either. His weak will and poor choices may well have saved the Republic were it not for Darth Gian, his young apprentice. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Somewhere around 600 BBY, the man who would become Darth Gravid was recruited by the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith as an apprentice. He was taught all of the dark side's many techniques and became knowledgeable in the lore of the Sith.
Whoa, that's a cool image.
He was also informed of Darth Bane's Sith grand plan. In time, he, like many Sith Lords before him, slew his master and claimed the title of Dark Lord for himself. He found his own apprentice, a young Twi'lek, who he gave the name Darth Gian. Together, they built a fortress on the planet of Jaguda, an ancient Sith world that had been rendered desert and abandoned for thousands of years prior. There, Gravid gathered all of the various Sith artifacts and tomes the Order had collected over the years, which had been passed down from master to apprentice since the death of Darth Bane. Gravid was intimately familiar with all of this lore, which included some of the last remaining written or holographic instructions for the practice of certain dark side powers. Thousands of years of Sith knowledge were sealed within Gravid's vaults for safekeeping. But Gravid wasn't only concerned with Sith lore. The ultimate goal of the Sith was the destruction of the Jedi Order, and so he acquainted himself with the Jedi lore as well, reasoning that he and his apprentice had to know what they were up against. That was essentially how Gravid spent most of his time as a Dark Lord. Where other Sith would have spent their years steadily weakening the Republic and the Jedi Order, Gravid simply studied the Jedi and sent Darth Gian out to do whatever he believed needed doing. That's pretty lackluster as it is, but it gets worse. As Darth Gravid studied Jedi lore, he started to be drawn to it. He started making altruism and empathy major components of his practices and teachings, values that starkly contrasted with the ideology of the Sith. In time,
So he was more
he came to the conclusion that the
between?
Sith's sole reliance on the dark side was a weakness, and that, to succeed, the Sith had to adopt Jedi teachings. Ideologically, he became a sort of grey Jedi, or rather a grey Sith,
Yeah, there we go.
and sought to remake the Order of the Sith Lords according to this framework. Darth Gravid evidently did not understand the Force. There was only the light side and the dark side, or rather, there was only the Force as it was meant to be, and its perversion. You could either heed the will of the Force, as was the way of the light, or you could reject it, as was the way of the dark, and doing a little of both was not viable long term. The dark side was inherently corrupting, and just a little use of it would poison a whole being, even if they adopted a bit of light side into their Force diet. The two sides of the Force were irreconcilable, just as the Jedi and Sith were irreconcilable. In attempting to reconcile the two, Gravid drove himself mad. He also severely weakened himself. He wasn't the first to develop this foolhardy notion of a middle ground between light and dark. The ancient Jedi Order, for example, spent 10,000 years trying in vain to pursue that goal. Just like this failing led to the downfall of the Jedi Order, it destroyed Darth Gravid too. You see, despite his coming around to some aspects of Jedi philosophy, Gravid was still ultimately a Darksider, and this change in philosophy weakened his ability to use the Force as he had been trained to. The dark side was about imposing one's own will on the Force, but passion and strong motives were needed to accomplish this, and Gravid's philosophical crisis diminished his motivation, and thus his power. It's possible that Darth Gian, Gravid's apprentice, sensed this, and that this was how she knew something had gone wrong.
She killed him, didn't she?
Whether or not that was the case, she knew something was up. However, she didn't make any moves against Gravid right away, as she was still rather young and in the earlier stages of her training. But Gravid forced her hand. By 552
By the way, does he have
BBY,
one red blade and
his
one green
madness
blade?
progressed to the point where he came to believe that the only way to remake the Sith was to destroy them. Believing he would be able to guide the Order to a more successful path afterwards, he raised Force barriers around his fortress and began destroying the contents of its vaults. He resolved to purge all that remained of the old Sith teachings and set about destroying holocrons, artifacts, and books of lore in earnest. It should be noted that not even the Jedi went that far in fighting the Sith teachings. They preferred to preserve even Sith holocrons, albeit in heavily guarded vaults where they theoretically could do no damage. Fortunately for the Sith, Darth Gian wasn't going to stand for any of this. Despite still being a young apprentice, Gian broke through the Force barriers around the fortress and confronted her master, resolving to claim the title of Dark Lord early. She and her master fought one last duel with the fate of the Sith at stake. Gravid, apparently, still had a good bit of skill in him. He managed to cleave off a good chunk of Gaen's left side, removing her arm and chunks of her face and chest. Through the power of the dark side, Gaen survived this, and ultimately, Gravid's skill with the lightsaber couldn't save him. He had gotten so weak that Gaen, despite being disarmed, severely wounded and inexperienced, still managed to kill him and claim the title of Dark Lord. In doing so, she saved the Order of the Sith Lords and a good deal of Sith lore. Gravid's final defeat just goes to show how weak he had become. There was no way in hell a Sith Lord should have lost that fight after gaining such an advantage, and yet he did exactly that. He did nothing productive in his time as a Dark Lord, and with the Sith so numerically limited under the rule of 2, he was a huge waste of training. There had been Sith Lords in the past who had returned to the light, but never before had one suffered such an ideological collapse, and none before had become as weak as Gravid. Through prosthetic reconstruction, Darth Gian was able to completely recover from the wounds Gravid had dealt her, making the former Sith Lord's only lasting legacy the destruction of a bunch of Sith lore. This sent the Sith grand plan back centuries, as Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious later noted, and led to the disappearance of several ancient Sith powers and rites. The most notable loss was Darth Andadu's essence transfer techniques, which Sith masters had used to attempt to cheat death by taking over their apprentices' bodies. Sith apprentices
would definitely have done
particularly miss that power, though Sith masters certainly did. So that's the story of Darth Gravid, the weakest Dark Lord of the Sith.
Alright, so that was who was the weakest Sith to ever terrorize the galaxy. I mean, didn't really look like this person even terrorized the galaxy. He just spent most of his time learning and adapting more of the light side rather than the dark. So he was like somewhere in between. But that explains a whole lot that he wasn't productive. He didn't even it didn't even sound like he'd even terrorize the galaxy. He just said, I'm a Sith Lord. I'm not gonna hurt any of you. But anyways, this is a great video, so thank you so much for the recommendation again. So again, shout out to Geetsly for creating this video and providing it for all of us to watch. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to hit that notification bell so you know when I drop another video. And thank you so much for your guys' support. I really do appreciate it. It means everything to me. And until then, I'll see you guys next time.